Commander Lissa stepped out of the ship and onto the Earth's surface for the first time. The air was different here, warmer, filled with strange smells, and so many sounds. She tried not to show it, but every little noise made her sensitive. Ears twitch. She was trained to stay calm, always, but Perth was too alive. This was her first peaceful visit to the human planet, after many years of silence and misunderstandings between the Zinthri and the humans. The two sides had agreed to send cultural representatives. Lissa didn't want to come. She believed humans were loud, wild, and full of chaos. But as a high-ranking diplomat, she had no choice. She was led to a large open space by her assistant. Humans called it a park. There were lights everywhere and screens showing images. Hundreds of people were gathered, waiting. Children ran freely, laughing. Lissa watched quietly. On her home world, children were silent in public. Then it started. A loud vibration moved through the air. Lissa felt it in her bones before she heard it in her ears. A sound sharp, rough, fast. Her eyes widened. It was unlike anything she had heard before. She looked toward the stage, where a group of humans stood with strange instruments. One of them stepped forward, holding a curved object with wires. Then came the noise again. The sound was coming from that object. Humans called it a guitar. The boy playing it had wild hair and a focused look on his face. He moved his fingers fast, and the air seemed to change. The noise rose and fell like a storm. Lissa winced. Her ears were not made for this. She raised a hand, ready to signal her assistant to stop the sound. But she stopped herself, because something strange happened. The crowd was moving. Humans were nodding their heads, smiling, clapping. Children were jumping. An older woman wiped a tear from her eye. Lissa blinked. What was going on? How could this sharp noise make people feel so much? Still, it hurt her ears. She leaned closer to her assistant. What is this? She asked in a soft voice. The assistant looked nervous. It is called music, Commander. More specifically, hard rock. Humans enjoy it. This is not music. She said coldly. This is noise. The assistant didn't reply. He only looked down. Lissa wanted to leave. She wanted the sound to stop. But just as she turned, something pulled her attention back. The boy on the stage, he looked up. His eyes met hers, just for a second, and he smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was something else. Calm, confident, almost kind. He didn't stop playing. In fact, the music changed. It slowed, grew deeper. It became something new, softer, but still full of power. Lissa didn't know why, but she froze. She watched as his fingers danced across the strings. The lights above him flashed in time with the rhythm, and for just a moment, she didn't flinch. The sound didn't hurt. It felt warm, like sunlight on cold skin. But the moment passed. A louder part returned, and Lissa turned quickly, walking away from the crowd. Her assistant followed, asking if she was all right. She didn't answer. Her steps were fast, but her mind was slow. Something about that music had touched a part of her that she had locked away long ago. Back inside the quiet ship, she sat alone in her room. Her hands were still, her face was calm, but her thoughts were loud. Why couldn't she stop hearing that sound? She told herself it was just a side effect, a human trick, some kind of earth frequency that confused her senses. That must be it. And yet, she reached for the console and opened the Earth database. Her fingers moved slowly, typing in words she didn't expect to type. Guitar solo. The screen showed many clips. Humans playing, dancing, smiling. She played one video, then another. She kept the volume low. She told herself it was for research. But her heart beat faster. There was something strange about these sounds, something no one had warned her about. The logic in her mind said it was nothing. But deep inside, behind all her training and rules, something else was waking up, a feeling. And Lissa did not like that. Feelings were dangerous. Feelings were forbidden. But the guitar, it had already started something she could no longer ignore. Lissa sat in her quiet room, but her mind was anything but quiet. She had listened to the music again 3 times now. She told herself it was just for study. She was only gathering information about human behavior, nothing more. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Something inside her had shifted. Even if she didn't understand it yet, the sound stayed with her like a shadow. It wasn't just the volume or the strange rhythms, it was the way it made her feel. Every note seemed to pull at something hidden deep inside her, something old, something buried. She didn't want to admit it, but the music had touched her. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. On her planet, music had been removed from daily life many years ago. It was seen as a distraction, a path to emotions that led to mistakes. Her people had chosen silence and logic. Feelings were pushed aside. She was raised to believe that emotions were a weakness, but now she wasn't so sure. Late that night, while most of her crew slept, she returned to the Earth database. She opened another music clip, this time choosing one that was marked live performance. A man with long hair stood in front of a huge crowd, his fingers moving quickly on a guitar. The music started fast, then slowed, and then rose again with energy she couldn't describe. Lissa closed her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. She listened, really listened. The notes told a story without words, but full of something strong. There was sadness, hope, and even joy in the sound. She didn't know how she could feel all of that just from vibrations in the air, but she did. She felt it in her chest, in her hands, in her memory. When the music ended, she didn't move for a long time. Later, as she stood in front of the window, looking down at the earth below, she wondered what was happening to her. Why couldn't she stop thinking about it? Why was one human sound more powerful than any speech or treaty? The next day, she asked to visit the Earth Park again. Her assistant was surprised. "Is something wrong, Commander?" "No," she said simply. "I want to observe more human customs." Back at the park, the crowd was smaller this time. The stage was still there, but only one person stood on it, Jace, the boy from the last performance. He sat alone with his guitar, quietly playing to himself. The sound was gentle, almost like he was speaking to someone no one else could see. Lissa didn't step forward. She stood behind a glass wall nearby, where she couldn't be seen. She watched him play, watched his eyes close and his fingers move as if they had a mind of their own. The notes floated into the air like soft light. People passed by, some stopping to listen, some not, but Lissa stayed. Something about the way he played made her feel like time had slowed. And then, for just a moment, he looked up. His eyes swept across the area, calm and steady. He didn't smile this time. He didn't stop playing. But somehow, she felt like he saw her even behind the glass, even through the crowd. She turned away quickly, heart beating faster than normal. Back on her ship, she found herself humming. The sound came from her without warning. It was low, almost like a whisper, but it had rhythm. She stopped, shocked that she had never hummed before. What was this music doing to her? She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her face looked the same. Cold, serious, professional. But her eyes, they looked different. Softer, maybe. Confused, yes. And curious. Lissa didn't understand humans. Not yet. But she was starting to understand something else. That music, which she once called noise, had opened a small door inside her. And now, she wasn't sure if she could close it again. *JACE sat on a bench made of stone, not far from the trees that lined the human park. His guitar rested in his lap, and his fingers moved slowly over the strings, not playing anything specific, just feeling. The sunlight came through the clouds in pieces, and a gentle breeze made the leaves dance quietly above him. Most people passed by without noticing, but he didn't mind. Music was never about being seen. It was about what couldn't be said. With words, a few meters away, hidden behind a shielded observation dome, Lissa watched him. She told herself it was a study session, just observation, learning about human expressions. But deep inside, she knew that wasn't true. She had come back because of the sound, not to study it but to feel it again. He was different from the others. When he played, it didn't feel like performance. It felt like honesty, pure, raw, unhidden, something she had never experienced in her world. She didn't understand how he could be so open. Lissa stood still, arms crossed, eyes sharp, but her thoughts weren't sharp at all. They were heavy and soft at the same time. Every note from his guitar seemed to speak to her, even though there were no words. She remembered a training lesson from long ago. Her mentor had said, "Emotion is a fire. Touch it once, and it will follow you forever." Back then, she had believed fire could always be controlled, but now she wasn't so sure. Jace stopped playing and looked up at the sky. Then, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes moved around the park, calm and slow, and then they stopped on her. He couldn't see her, not through the glass, but somehow she felt like he did. She felt like he could hear the quiet noise her heart was making, and that's when it happened. He smiled, just a little, not wide, not loud, just a small, simple smile like he knew something she didn't, and then he played something different. The first note felt like a question, the second like a memory. It was slower than before, deeper, with space between the sounds. It was the kind of song you'd hear when standing at the edge of a great change. Lissa's breath caught in her throat. It felt like he was playing for her, not at her. Not around her, but to the part of her she didn't show anyone. The part that had been silent for years. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her fingers, tight at first, slowly loosened. She let her arms fall to her sides. She wasn't afraid. Not exactly. But she was full of something she had no name for. Her assistant whispered through the communicator, "Commander, should I prepare the shuttle to return?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer to the edge of the dome. She reached out and placed her hand on the glass. Inside the music, there was a story, and she didn't know why, but she wanted to hear all of it. Later, back on her ship, she listened to a recording of the session. She played the same part again and again, the new melody. She saved it to her private files, hiding it where no one could see. Even her assistant didn't know. And then, just before sleep, she did something she hadn't done in decades. She whispered. A sound, soft, low, musical, a single note, like the beginning of something. It wasn't from her people. It wasn't part of any language. It was human. But it came from her. The next morning, she woke up early. Before the sun rose on Earth, she stood by the window of her ship, watching the blue planet turn slowly in the black sky. In her hand was a small data crystal. Inside it, the song, the one he played, the one that made her forget what silence was. Like that, she held it tight. She didn't know what she was going to do with it. Not yet. But she knew one thing now. She had listened, and something inside her had started to change. The rain came gently, brushing against the windows of her ship like a soft rhythm from a faraway world. Lissa stood in her quarters, watching Earth's clouds shift and move. Her thoughts were no longer silent, not like before. The music still lived inside her. Every note Jace had played still echoed, not in her ears, but somewhere deeper. She hadn't returned to the park since that last moment. She told herself it was because of duty, that her schedule was full, but the truth sat quietly in her chest. She was scared of how much she had felt. It wasn't pain. It wasn't confusion. It was something warmer, something that stayed long. After the music ended, she played the recording again. The guitar filled the room with the same soft melody. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. But it had power, an invisible kind of strength that didn't need volume to be heard. Lissa closed her eyes, and for the first time, the sound didn't feel foreign. It felt familiar. A sudden image appeared in her mind. She was not on the ship. She was somewhere else. A place she had never seen before. Green hills, open skies, and a voice singing in the distance. A soft voice, not human, not Zinthri, but familiar. The kind of familiar that didn't belong to this life. Then a second image. A small child reaching up, hands open, eyes full of joy. And beside the child, a tall figure humming a melody. Rocking slowly, Lissa opened her eyes, her breath catching. The vision was gone, but her hands were shaking. What had she seen? She turned to her console and opened a hidden file, an old one. A genetic memory scan taken during her training years ago. Her people had long known that traces of ancient memories sometimes lived in their blood. Usually, these memories were locked, unseen, but sometimes a strong enough signal, a sound, a word, even a smell could unlock them. Had the music done that? She ran the skin again, overlaying it with the recording of Jace's song. As the notes played, a soft light pulsed from the memory file. A reaction. Her breath slowed. The sound wasn't just beautiful, it was a key that had opened something her people had forgotten for generations. She sat down slowly. Her people had always believed that emotion led to weakness, and weakness led to loss. That's why they had erased music, art, even storytelling. All that remained was logic, silence, and purpose. But what if they had erased something more? Something that made them whole. Later that day, she did something unexpected. She sent a message to JACE. Just a simple one. I would like to understand more about your music. He replied only minutes later. Music isn't something you understand. It's something you feel. She stared at the message for a long time, then sent another. Can we meet in a quiet place? They met near the lake, far from the city noise. Jace brought his guitar, but didn't play it right away. They sat on a bench, silent at first. The wind moved gently through the trees, and small birds chirped in the distance. She looked at him carefully. Why do you play? She asked. Jace tilted his head. Because I have something to say that words can't express. Lissa nodded slowly. That melody, the one you played last time, it made me see something. A memory that wasn't mine. A child. A voice, a feeling I don't have words for. That's the point. He said with a gentle smile. Music speaks where language ends. She looked down at her hands. My people lost this a long time ago. We forgot how to feel it. Or maybe we locked it away. He lifted the guitar and began to play again, very softly. This time, he looked at her while playing, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that invited understanding. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just listened. The song was slower than before, more delicate, but it had layers, like it was carrying both joy and sadness. At the same time, her eyes stayed open, but something inside her closed its eyes and listened fully. And then, without meaning to, she reached out and touched the strings gently, not to stop the sound but to feel it. It vibrated through her fingertips. Warm, alive. She looked up at him. I don't know what this is, but I don't want to lose it. Jace nodded, still playing. Then don't, just let it stay. And in that moment, Lissa understood something very small, but very important. She didn't need to fully understand human music. She just needed to let it live inside her. Back aboard the Zinthri vessel, everything was still. The quiet halls, the soft white lights, the air filled with controlled calm. It was all exactly the way it had always been. But Lissa didn't feel the same anymore. The silence that once brought her comfort now felt empty, like a room with no windows, and in the middle of that silence, her thoughts played a quiet melody she couldn't escape. She stood at the central console, reviewing reports from the council. They were monitoring her activity more closely now. A slight delay in communication, a repeated visit to Earth's public zones, a shift in her bio readings that hinted at emotional disturbance. It was all being tracked. And now, they had questions. The message was short, formal, and cold. Commander Lissa, your emotional markers have exceeded protocol levels. Return to the home system immediately for recalibration. She read the words again and again, not with fear, but with something else. A quiet knowing that she had crossed a line her people didn't want crossed. For a moment, she considered deleting the message, but she didn't. She closed it gently and looked out the viewing window toward Earth, where the blue seas moved beneath slow-moving clouds. Somewhere down there, Jace was probably playing again, maybe in the park, maybe alone on a quiet rooftop, where the stars could hear him. She thought of his words. Music isn't something you understand. It's something you feel. And she had felt it. Truly. But now that feeling came with a cost. Her hands hovered over the console. She could return, pretend nothing had changed, let the memory fade, let the silence take over again. But she didn't want that anymore. Later that evening, she took the guitar chip Jace had given her. It was small and shaped like a flat, transparent stone. Inside was a short recording, a solo, recorded just for her. He had said nothing when he gave it to her, only nodded, like he knew she would need it one day. She placed the chip into the ship's main AI terminal. The lights dimmed, and the first soft note rang out. It was simple, even quieter than usual, but it carried something heavy, like the beginning of a story too old to be told in words. The melody filled the command deck. And Lissa listened alone. As the song continued, her bio readings shifted again. The system detected rising emotional waves. The AI voice spoke gently. Commander, emotional threshold is approaching maximum limit. Do you wish to continue? Lissa closed her eyes. Yes. The solo moved into deeper tones, slower, more thoughtful. Each note felt like it was reaching through time, touching something lost. As the final note faded, Lissa sat still, her hands resting on her knees, her breathing slow and steady. Then she whispered, I remember now, not fully, not clearly, but enough. She remembered warmth, a place, a song hummed by someone whose face she couldn't see. She didn't know if it was a memory passed down from generations or something her heart had created from the music, but it didn't matter. It was real to her. And she wasn't ready to let it go. The next morning, she prepared a message for the council. It was brief, honest, and without apology. I cannot return yet. There is something on Earth I still need to understand. She knew what their response would be. She would likely be removed from duty, watched, isolated, maybe more. But she had already made her choice. Later that day, she walked alone through the Earth Gardens near the lakeside. The wind was soft, and the leaves rustled like whispers between trees. And there, sitting by the water, was Jace, not playing, just sitting, as if he had been waiting. She walked up beside him and sat down without a word. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she looked at him. They want to take it away from me. He nodded slowly. That's what happens when something changes you. I'm not afraid, she said. I know, he replied. That's why it changed you. She looked at the guitar resting beside him. Play it again, please. He picked it up and smiled, not wide, just enough. Then his fingers moved, and the strings sang a new melody, one that felt like a goodbye, but not an end, just a beginning. And Lissa listened, not as a commander, not as a Zinthri, not as a diplomat. Just as herself. The hall was filled with silence, not the natural kind. This silence was created on purpose, controlled by design. A silence where no mistake could hide. Commander Lissa stood at the center of it, surrounded by the glowing eyes of the Zinthri Council. The chamber was large and round, the walls smooth and silver, with no windows. Light came from above in pale beams that gave no warmth. She had returned, not because she gave up, and not because she was afraid. She had returned because she had to show them what she had found, not in numbers, not in logic, but in something deeper. She held the small device in her hand, a simple audio crystal. It looked like nothing, just a clear stone with faint light inside. But what it carried was something her people had long forgotten. Music. JACE single quotes as solo. The melody that had broken through her silence. A voice from the high platform spoke. Commander Lissa, your behavior has crossed several boundaries. Emotional interference, rejection of protocol, continued contact with an unapproved cultural source. You were ordered to return for correction. Lissa didn't look up yet. She waited, calm, focused. Another voice followed. Before your status is changed, you are allowed to speak. You may justify your actions. Choose your words carefully. She raised her head slowly. I will not use words. The room shifted slightly. A murmur moved through the council, though no one spoke. Confusion was rare here. Lissa stepped forward and placed the crystal on the central console. Then she touched the activation symbol. A soft hum rose, and then the first gentle notes played. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The solo began, just as it had on Earth, slow, quiet, full of space between each note. The kind of sound that gives the heart time to breathe. For a long moment, no one moved. The melody swirled around the room, touching metal walls, soft air, and quiet hearts. Some of the council members tilted their heads slightly, as if remembering something they didn't know they had forgotten. A younger member closed his eyes. An elder leaned forward without meaning to. The solo continued. It grew not in volume, but in feeling. Each note rose like a wave and fell like a memory. It was filled with something the chamber hadn't felt in years. Truth without calculation. Lissa stood still. She didn't explain it. She didn't argue. She let the music speak. And when it ended, the silence that followed was different. It was no longer cold. It was thoughtful. The high voice spoke again, this time softer. "What is this?" She looked up at them, her voice steady. "It is something we once knew, before we chose silence, before we removed anything we could not measure." Another counselor whispered, "But it stirs feelings. We chose logic." "And yet," Lissa said, "it is part of us." Still, no one responded for a long while. Then, a single sound echoed in the hall. A breath. It came from one of the oldest members, someone who hadn't spoken in years. Her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. "I remember," she said, barely louder than a whisper. The moment passed. The lights dimmed slightly, as if the chamber itself understood. Lissa was not punished. She was not praised either. But she was allowed to leave, free to return to Earth if she wished. No words were spoken after that. The council simply let her walk away, the music still hanging softly in the air behind her. Outside the chamber, the stars were waiting. A day later, she stood once again near the lake on Earth. The wind was warm, and the water moved in smooth circles. Jace was there, sitting on a rock with his guitar beside him. She sat next to him without speaking. "I heard," he said. "They let you go." "They listened," she said. "Not to me, but to you." He smiled faintly. "No, they listened to themselves. I just gave them the mirror." She looked at the sky. "There's still so much I don't understand. You don't have to," he said. "That's the beautiful part." She reached out and touched the strings of his guitar gently. This time, she didn't flinch. "Play," she whispered. And he did. The music returned, not as noise, not as confusion, but as something real, something human, something she had once called strange. Now, she called it home.